After he said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, "Very truly, I tell you, one of you is going to betray me." His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which of them he meant. One of them, the apostle whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to the disciple and said, "Ask him which one he means." Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. When he was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only for a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Simon Peter asked him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus replied, "Where I am going, you cannot follow, but you will follow later." Peter asked, "Lord, why can't I follow you? I will lay down my life for you." Then Jesus answered, "Will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command.
The disciples are having their last supper with Jesus. They just don't know it yet. Jesus is teaching, as Jesus does, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he says, "I tell you the truth. One of you is going to betray me." The disciples stare at one another at a loss. What? Who? What? And then before they can wrap their minds around that, Jesus dips a piece of bread into the dish, hands it to their friend Judas, and says, "What you are about to do quickly." What? Do what, Jesus? Jesus speaks again, and the disciples' concerns only grow. "My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, but where I'm going, you can't come." What? Simon Peter spits out the first thing that comes to mind. "Lord, where are you going?" Unable to handle the thought that they could lose Jesus, he shouts, "I'll die to keep you with us." "No, you won't," Jesus answers. And with that conversation, everything changes. Up until now, things with Jesus have been astonishing, sometimes even challenging, but ultimately very, very encouraging. Jesus has been giving people powerful new names. Jesus has been opening up unheard of possibilities. Jesus has been comping another round of wine, miracle wine at the party. Jesus has been healing sick kids, understanding people in ways they've longed to be understood, standing up to bullies, jump-starting stagnant lives, giving his friend Lazarus new life. And all along, he's been implying, even when not flat out saying, can you believe that this is what God wants for you and for others? Can you believe that the God who wants this much goodness for you and for the world wants to be this close to you? As close as I am right now. After all that has been building and building, after the disciples have indeed begun to believe it, Jesus, God with them, suddenly announces, I'm going away. You can't come. Through 12 chapters of John, Jesus has shown the disciples that through him, God is with them. But now, suddenly, Jesus announces that they are going to have to be without him. He's leaving. They can't come. The disciples must be terrified. Some of them might be feeling a little betrayed. But then Jesus continues. I'm going away. You can't go with me. But know this. But know this. After telling them that he's leaving, Jesus delivers a 4-chapter-long speech before he goes. 4 chapters. Fancy people call it the farewell discourse. But let's call it what it is. Jesus' words of comfort to his beloved disciples who have just been blindsided by the fact that he is leaving. Okay, I know that's a bit of a long title. But for all the lines in these next 4 passages that theologians have used to construct theologies and pastors have used to make their points, what sometimes gets lost in though is that those next 4 chapters, in other words, what happens in basically the rest of the Gospel of John up until Jesus' arrest, is that Jesus comforts and reassures his disciples before this really, really hard thing happens. Now, we didn't read all 4 of those chapters today, and we won't go through all of them in our series on John, but there are some clues in the text about at least one part we might want to make especially sure we don't miss. I am, Jesus begins, I am the vine, and my Father is the gardener, and you are the branches. I am. In the Gospel of John, Jesus, a teacher, uses a pattern to teach. Again and again, he draws attention to the big things he wants the disciples to know and grapple with by finishing the sentence, I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am he who testifies about myself. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am, and this is the very last one, the final Jesus I am statement, so pay attention. I am the vine and you are the branches. Jesus has at least one more I am up his sleeve. Has he been building up to this one? Is this his most important one? Is this the one that brings all the others together? Maybe, maybe not. We obviously can't say for sure, but what we can definitely say is that when Jesus was running out of time to teach and when his students were profoundly anxious because they were about to go through something very, very hard, this is Jesus' last I am teaching of them all. But there's more. Because there's something else that should grab our attention here. While explaining what he means with this I am the vine and you are the branches business. Jesus leans heavily on the word, if you look in your NRSVs at least, the word abide. Abide in me as I abide in you. The branch must abide in the vine. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. And so on. Those aren't even all of the times that Jesus says abide in that short passage. And like the I am statements, the word abide is a big part of John's gospel. Biblical scholar Jamie Clark Souls points out that John uses this word more than 40 times. 40 times in what in my Bible is just 45 pages. And well, not to brag about how smart my Bible is, but that's a Bible where half the pages are footnotes. So basically, John uses the word abide over 40 times in approximately 23 pages. That's almost twice per page. He uses it, Clark Souls also points out, in 16 of his 21 chapters. John has a thing for the word abide. Or rather, John wants us to know that Jesus has a thing for the word abide. And here, after the great reveal that Jesus has to go, when the cards are on the table, when the disciples are terrified, rightfully terrified, Jesus brings two of his big things together. I am and abide. Jesus' big teaching tool, I am statements, collides with Jesus' important word, abide. And in this big moment, when the disciples need big comfort, we get the mashup of two of Jesus' greatest hits, I am and abide. And we get, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Abide in me as I abide in you. Now, that said, unless you're one of those people who watches The Big Lebowski every year, it's a joke for a very small number of you, where the dude famously also abides, abide is probably not a very familiar word to you. But it sure is a word of comfort for the disciples in this moment. Abide means, as we heard as well, to remain. But it also means to live in. In other words, Jesus is saying, I'm going away, you can't come, but I will abide in you. You will abide in me. I will go away, but I will remain in you because I will live in you and you can live in me. Now, if all of that sounds a little too mystical, John, kind of uncharacteristically for John, actually shows Jesus spelling it out even more directly. What does it look like for people to abide in each other? What, practically speaking, is that kind of relationship called? Well, as Jesus continues, it's called friendship. You are my friends, Jesus continues. You are my friends. By the way, just a side note, now that we've gone through all that, I know that for many of us, all this nice talk about abiding and being friends might feel a little eclipsed by that one line about how if we don't abide, we're like branches that are collected up and thrown into a fire. So in case it helps, let me just add this. Unfortunately, there have been Christians who like to take Jesus' analogies like this one to try to argue that Jesus is describing a literal hell that we're in danger of being damned into in the afterlife. But really, that's not the simplest and most straightforward reading of this passage. The simplest and most straightforward observation is that Jesus is using an agricultural analogy to make a point, and that's part of it. In a vineyard on a vine, the branches that abide thrive. The branches that don't abide don't thrive. The important thing here is that as Christians, the life we're called to is the life of abiding, of love, of friendship. If we're not abiding, loving, befriending, we're not really part of it. Think of it like this. I don't need to tell you that under the banner of being Christians, we can do a lot of things. We can make a lot of noise. We can claim a lot of moral high ground. We can cast a lot of judgment. We can scream at people that they must do this or that. We can claim that caring for ourselves rather than our neighbors is necessary to preserve a religious freedom. We can hurt another person and tell them it's because God is on our side. We can refuse to acknowledge the need for equity and justice because that's just how it's always been, so that must be what Jesus wants. As Christians, we can do a lot of things. But if what we're doing isn't rooted in abiding, in friendship, in truly being with one another and others in a spirit of love and generosity, what we're practicing might be something, but it might not be Christianity. It might not be any more Christian than a dead branch on the ground is a vine in the vineyard that is the true church. Jesus gives us an analogy that invites us to be people who abide along the way, reminding us that everything else has to grow from that. Which brings me back to my point. At this moment in John's gospel, when the disciples are facing something really, really hard, Jesus reaches for that favorite teaching tool in John, the I am statement, and one of his favorite words in John, abide, and Jesus teaches, when things get hard, harder than you ever experienced or expected, so hard that you're not sure if I'm even with you anymore, don't forget this. I am the vine, you are the branches. I abide in you, and you abide in me like friends. Because that's what we are, friends. You know, this Lenten season, which starts next Sunday, as with most Lenten seasons in worship, we're going to explore some of the more challenging parts of being Jesus' disciples. This Lent, using other stories from John and other passages from Scripture as well, we're going to look for how God's ways are different than our ways. How the ways we often hope God works, or the ways we act like God works, can get challenged when we find out how God really works. We're going to try to go to the places in ourselves, to the attitudes, the postures, the habits, where we prioritize easing our fears, even though God calls us to be brave, where we try to secure what's ours, even though God calls us to be generous, where we do things to feel exceptional, even though God calls us to be inclusive, where we reach for power over others, even though God calls us to have power with others. We're going to go to some of the places like this that have become so well established in us that it's become second nature to justify them, to even tell ourselves that God's helping us to do them. So there might be times where letting go of what we cling to might feel like God is leaving us. Maybe to say it more clearly, there might be times where we worry that if God is not where we wanted God to be, if God's ways take us out of our comfort zones, we might worry that we're kind of alone. But as we head out to find God beyond our comfort zones, Jesus is here with us. Today's teaching saying, fear not. We head into Lent. We head into this challenging work, or maybe this is for you if you're heading into something else that's hard, or if you're just looking out at the state of the world right now and unsure what you want to do out there. We do all of this with the same promise in hand that Jesus made to his disciples before their understandings of God were about to be stretched further than they could ever have imagined. Jesus will abide with us. Jesus will abide with us as our friend. Let's take that assurance with us into the challenging season of Lent. And in case it helps you to take this to heart, one last story. A true story from a school bus as told, I might need your help here, Rich. As told by Diana Butler Bass in her chapter on Jesus as a friend in the book Freeing Jesus. Here it is, in her words. In August 2019, at the beginning of the school year in the United States, a photo, next one, Rich, showing two little boys holding hands together went viral. Connor, an autistic boy entering second grade, was going to school for the first time. Although the bus trip went well, when he arrived at the school, he froze with fear and started to cry. He hid in the corner, unable to get off the bus and walk into the building. Christian, another boy, saw Connor and went to comfort him. Then he took Connor by the hand and led him inside the building. He found me, and he held my hand, and I got happy tears, Connor later told the reporter when asked about Christian. Connor's mother said, Christian is Connor's first real friend. And Christian's mother explained, they have an inseparable bond. Like millions of others who saw the photograph and read this story, I felt verklempt, unable to hold back small tears of joy. I also laughed because who would believe it? A boy named Christian, reaching out to help. It was an updated American parable, a rewrite of the Pilgrim's Progress. As I looked at the photograph, it seemed an icon for these days, a Jesus tenderly leading a frightened boy toward a new world. This is my commandment, said Jesus, that you love one another as I have loved you. You are my friends when you do what I command. Friends, when you leave the sanctuary this morning after our last song, the ushers are going to be handing out little stickers to remind you of the story, little bus stickers. They aren't just for the kids when you first see them, but kids, they are also for you because they're for all of us. This week, and by the way, this is also all written out in your little insert in your bulletin, so you can review it there. I invite you to consider taking that little school bus sticker and sticking it somewhere where you'll see it from now until Easter for Lent. Stick it there as a reminder that if we seek God's ways, we may well be brought to places of new learning that could at first make us nervous, places where we might not always want to get off the bus. But stick this sticker somewhere so that you'll also remember Connor and Christian. So that you'll also remember that even when we arrive at places of new learning that might make us nervous, we will also arrive with Jesus abiding in us, with us abiding in Jesus, with us abiding with one another. In other words, we will also arrive, like Connor, with a friend.